For 20 years, the mountain man refused every woman who came to his door. Then, one freezing morning in 1881, a stranger rode through the wilderness and knocked on his cabin door exactly once. When he opened it, she handed him a letter written by his mother, the woman who had been dead for 20 years. And what that letter revealed would make him question everything he believed about his family, his loneliness, and the promise that had controlled his life. If stories of mountain romance, hidden family secrets, wilderness mystery, and emotional frontier love keep you watching until the end, like this video, leave a comment telling us what you think the letter contains, and subscribe to the Mountain Tribe for more stories from the mountains. For 20 years, every woman who entered Nathaniel Mercer's life was turned away before she could even finish asking for his hand. Some came because they admired his strength. Some wanted the safety of a mountain cabin. Some believed they could soften the hard-eyed trapper who lived alone beyond the last road. But every one of them received the same answer. No. Never cruelly, never angrily. Nathaniel simply refused. And in the remote settlement of Pine Hollow, people had long ago stopped wondering why. They had begun calling him the loneliest man in the mountains. They said he hated women. They said his mother's death had made him bitter. They said he had once loved someone and been betrayed. Every version of the story was different. Only one thing remained consistent. Nathaniel Mercer had lived alone for 20 years. Until one cold October morning in 1881, when a woman rode up to his cabin, dismounted beside his woodpile, walked to his door, and knocked exactly once. That single knock would change everything. Her name was Eleanor Reed. She was 29 years old, traveled alone, and had spent 6 weeks crossing rough country to find him. She carried no expensive luggage, no family escort, no wedding dress, only one leather satchel, a worn rifle, and a small envelope tied with faded blue thread. The envelope contained a letter, and the letter had been written by Nathaniel's mother 20 years earlier. Eleanor stood outside the cabin while a cold autumn wind moved through the surrounding pines. She could see smoke rising from the chimney. She knew someone was inside. She knocked once. Nathaniel opened the door almost immediately. He was taller than she expected, broad through the shoulders, gray beginning to show at his temples. His dark beard was trimmed with a knife rather than a proper razor. His clothes were simple and practical: wool coat, worn boots, leather gloves, and a hunting belt. But his eyes were what Eleanor noticed. They were not angry. They were watchful, like a man who had spent too many years expecting trouble to arrive without warning. He looked at Eleanor, then at the horse, then back at her. "You took the wrong trail." Eleanor shook her head. "No. There isn't another trail." "I know." "Then you knew where you were going." "Yes." He waited. Eleanor reached into her satchel. "I came to see you." Nathaniel's face hardened. "If you're looking for work, there's nothing here." "I'm not." "If you're selling something, I don't need it." "I'm not selling anything." "If you're lost, I'm not lost." That finally made him pause. "Then why are you here?" Eleanor took out the envelope. "I was told to give you this." Nathaniel looked at the faded blue thread. The color drained from his face. He recognized it. He had not seen that thread in 20 years. His mother had used blue thread to tie everything she considered important. Letters, her sewing patterns, little bundles of herbs. Once, when Nathaniel was 12, she had tied a blue thread around a scrap of paper containing a list of things he needed to remember before winter. He had forgotten about the habit, until now. "Where did you get that?" Eleanor held out the envelope. "From my father." Nathaniel didn't take it. "Thomas Reed." Nathaniel stared at her. For the first time, Eleanor saw something like recognition. "Thomas," she nodded. "My father knew your mother." Nathaniel's expression changed again. "No." "He did." "No." His voice became colder. "My mother died 20 years ago." "I know." Thomas Reed died 8 years ago. I know. Nathaniel stared at the envelope. Then why are you carrying something that belongs to her? Because she sent it. He looked at Eleanor as if she had spoken nonsense. She's dead. I know. Then she didn't send it. Eleanor swallowed. She wrote it. Silence. 20 years ago. Nathaniel finally took the envelope. His hands trembled. Only slightly, but Eleanor noticed. He stared at his mother's handwriting. For 20 years, he had remembered his mother's voice. Now, for the first time in 20 years, her handwriting was in his hands. He stepped backward. Eleanor watched him. Should I go? Nathaniel looked at her. No. It was the first time he had ever asked a woman to stay. He moved aside. Eleanor entered. And neither of them knew that the letter she had carried across the mountains would soon reveal a secret powerful enough to destroy the story Nathaniel had believed about his family for 20 years. The snow that began falling that evening did not stop. By midnight, the trail Eleanor Reed had used to reach Nathaniel Mercer's cabin was already disappearing beneath a thick white blanket. By morning, the mountains looked completely different. The familiar pine ridges had become walls of white. The narrow trail down to Pine Hollow could no longer be seen. Nathaniel stood outside before sunrise, studying the weather. Eleanor watched him from the doorway. How long? She asked. 3 days, he replied. 3 days until the trail opens? If the storm weakens. And if it doesn't? Nathaniel looked toward the mountains. Then longer. Eleanor nodded. She wasn't frightened. Not yet. There was something more important on her mind. The letter. Nathaniel had locked it inside a small wooden box before going to sleep. Now he stood staring at that box, as though it contained something dangerous. Eleanor understood why. The letter had already changed the way he saw his mother. It had also introduced a question neither of them could ignore. Why had Nathaniel's mother written a letter that was meant to reach him 20 years after her death? And why had she known Eleanor would be the one to deliver it? After breakfast, Nathaniel placed the letter on the table. I read the first page. Eleanor looked at him. And? There are 5 pages. 5? He nodded. I stopped before finishing the 4th. Why? Because she asked me to go somewhere. Where? The old North Ridge. Eleanor frowned. There hasn't been a trail there for years. I know. Then why would she send you there? Nathaniel stared at the box. The letter. Because that's where my father disappeared. Eleanor felt a chill. She had expected a secret. She hadn't expected this. Nathaniel's mother had always told him that his father died during a winter trip when Nathaniel was young. He had never asked for details. He had been 8 years old when his father left the cabin. He remembered snow, a lantern, his father's heavy boots, and his mother's voice telling him to stay near the fire. His father never returned. Nathaniel had spent years believing he had died somewhere in the mountains. Then, 20 years ago, his mother died as well. Before she died, she made Nathaniel promise 3 things: never sell the cabin, never leave the mountain, and never marry. He had obeyed all 3 for 20 years. Now Eleanor understood how strange that promise really was. A dying mother normally asked a son to live. Nathaniel's mother had asked him to remain alone. That could not have been accidental. Why would she tell you not to marry? Eleanor asked. Nathaniel looked at the fire. I thought she was afraid of losing me. After your father's disappearance? Yes. Maybe she believed women would take you away from her memory. Nathaniel shook his head. She wasn't like that. Then what was she like? He smiled faintly. Strong. That isn't an answer. It is when you knew her. For the first time, there was warmth in his voice when he spoke about his mother. He continued. She wasn't afraid of anything. She'd walk into a blizzard to help someone who'd insulted her the day before. Eleanor smiled. She sounds like someone I would have liked. Nathaniel looked at her. She would have liked you. The words came out so naturally that neither of them reacted at first. Then, Eleanor realized what he had said. She looked away. Nathaniel cleared his throat. "We should read the rest." He opened the letter. His mother's handwriting filled the page. She wrote about the winter of 1861. She explained that Nathaniel's father had not disappeared by accident. He had been helping a family escape from a violent land dispute in the northern mountains. The family had owned a small valley that a wealthy land company wanted to control. Nathaniel's father had discovered that several settlers had been threatened into leaving. He tried to help them, but the land company had people watching him. He knew he was in danger. He also knew that if he stayed, his family could become targets. So he left, not because he wanted to abandon his wife and son, because he believed disappearing was the only way to keep them alive. Nathaniel stopped reading. His hands tightened around the paper. "My whole life." We looked at Eleanor. "I believed he left us." "He didn't. He chose to disappear. To protect you." Nathaniel looked back at the page. His expression was difficult to read. Anger, relief, grief, all of them seemed to exist at once. The letter continued. Nathaniel's mother explained that his father had once returned secretly. He had stood outside the cabin on a winter night. He had watched Nathaniel sleeping through the window. He wanted to come inside, but his wife stopped him, because someone had followed him. She had begged him to leave again, and he did. Nathaniel stared at those words for a long time. He came back. Eleanor whispered, "Yes." "You knew?" "No." Nathaniel's voice broke. All these years, he covered his face with one hand. For a man who had rarely shown emotion, the moment was devastating. Eleanor didn't touch him immediately. She allowed him to grieve. Eventually, he lowered his hand. "I spent 20 years hating a dead man. He wasn't dead." Nathaniel looked up sharply. Eleanor froze. "What?" Nathaniel read the final paragraph again. His face had gone pale. "What does it say?" He handed her the page. Eleanor read it. The words were unmistakable. "Your father is alive." She looked at Nathaniel. Neither spoke. The man Nathaniel had mourned for 20 years might still be somewhere in those mountains. But the letter was not finished. It said his father had been living under another name. His mother had known where he was. She had exchanged letters with him for years, but she had never told Nathaniel because the people who had hunted him were still searching. Then came the reason for the letter. His mother believed the danger was finally gone, but she had died before she could tell him. So she had entrusted the message to Thomas Reed. If Thomas died before delivering it, the letter was to remain hidden until his daughter was old enough to understand what it meant. Eleanor looked at Nathaniel. "Your father knew my father." Nathaniel nodded slowly. "More than that." He took the letter. "She says Thomas helped him disappear." Eleanor suddenly remembered her father's strange habits. The locked desk in his study. The old maps he never allowed her to touch. The trips he took into the mountains. She had thought those things belonged to another life. "My father knew where he was," she whispered. Nathaniel's eyes hardened. "Then why didn't he tell you?" "I don't know." Silence filled the cabin. Outside, the snow intensified. Nathaniel stood. "We're going north." Eleanor stared at him. "Now?" "As soon as the storm allows it." "You don't even know where we're going." "I know the ridge." "Your mother said the ridge." "Yes. And what exactly are we looking for?" Nathaniel folded the letter. "My father." Eleanor stood. "Then I'm coming." Nathaniel looked at her. "No." "Why?" "Because this has nothing to do with you. My father is part of it. That doesn't make it safe. I crossed half the country to bring you that letter, and I don't want you risking your life because of it." Eleanor's expression hardened. "You don't get to decide that." Nathaniel stared at her. She stepped closer. "You spent 20 years deciding what your life would be because of promises made by other people." He said nothing. "Your mother told you not to marry." Silence. Your father disappeared without explaining why. Silence. Your father left instructions for my father. Still silence. And now my father is dead, but I'm supposed to turn around because you think this is your burden. Nathaniel looked at her. It's dangerous. So is staying here. He frowned. How? Because the more you learn, the more you're going to realize your entire life was built on things you were never allowed to understand. Eleanor softened. I'm not asking you to trust me with your life. She paused. I'm asking you to let me help you find the truth. Nathaniel looked down at the letter, then back at her. You're stubborn. My mother would have liked that. Eleanor smiled. Then perhaps she knew exactly what she was doing. For the first time, Nathaniel smiled fully. It lasted only a moment, but Eleanor noticed. The man who had refused every woman for 20 years had just smiled at the woman who had arrived carrying his mother's letter. Neither of them mentioned it. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Nathaniel checked the horses. Eleanor repaired her saddle straps. They packed dried meat, flour, blankets, rope, lantern oil, rifles, and enough ammunition to survive several weeks. The cabin began to feel different. Before Eleanor arrived, it had been a place designed for one person. Now there were 2 cups beside the stove, 2 coats hanging near the door, 2 pairs of boots by the fire. Nathaniel noticed. He didn't remove anything. On the 3rd morning, the storm finally weakened. They rode north. The trail climbed through dense pine forest. The farther they traveled, the quieter the mountains became. There were no hunting camps, no cabins, no signs of settlement, only trees, snow, and steep cliffs. Near sunset, Nathaniel stopped. What is it? Eleanor asked. He pointed toward a tree. Someone had carved a symbol into the bark, a small circle surrounding a mountain peak. The same symbol appeared in the margin of his mother's letter. Eleanor dismounted. Was that here 20 years ago? Nathaniel shook his head. I don't know. He studied the carving. It could be a trail marker, or a warning. They continued. An hour later they found an abandoned cabin. It stood beneath a ridge, half buried by snow. Nathaniel dismounted slowly. He stared at the cabin. I know this place. You've been here? No. He looked confused. My mother drew it. Eleanor looked at the letter. The final page showed a rough sketch. A cabin, a ridge, a tall pine beside a stream. It matched exactly. Nathaniel approached the door. His hand stopped inches from the latch. He looked at Eleanor. My father could be inside. The door creaked open. The cabin was empty. Dust covered everything. A rusted stove, an old bed, a broken table. But on the wall was something that made Nathaniel stop breathing. A photograph. An old photograph of a younger man standing beside a woman. Nathaniel recognized the man immediately, his father, and beside him stood another man, Thomas Reed. Eleanor stared at the photograph. My father. Nathaniel stepped closer. Behind the photograph was a handwritten message. He removed it carefully. There were only 4 words. He never left the mountains. Nathaniel looked at Eleanor. For 20 years he had believed his father abandoned him. Now he knew the truth was far more complicated. His father had survived. His mother had known. Thomas Reed had known. Families had carried the secret across decades. But why? What had they been protecting Nathaniel from? And why had his mother waited until after her death to send Eleanor into his life? As night fell over the ridge, Nathaniel lit a lantern inside the abandoned cabin. Eleanor sat across from him. Neither spoke for several minutes. Then Nathaniel said quietly, My mother didn't send you here to find my father. Eleanor looked up. Then why did she? Nathaniel held the letter. At the very bottom, hidden beneath the fold, was one final sentence neither of them had noticed. He read it aloud. If Eleanor Reed reaches you, trust her with the truth I was too afraid to tell you. Eleanor stared at him. The words changed the journey again. This wasn't only about a missing father. It wasn't only about an old promise. Nathaniel's mother had chosen Eleanor for a reason. And somewhere beyond the ridge, Someone still knew the truth she had spent 20 years protecting. By dawn, Nathaniel and Eleanor would follow the next clue, deeper into the mountains. But they would soon discover that Nathaniel's father was not hiding from the world. He was hiding from a secret that could put both of them in danger. And Eleanor would have to learn why her own father had spent his final years protecting a man she had never known existed. The words written at the bottom of Nathaniel's mother's letter remained between them long after the lantern flame had burned low. If Eleanor Reed reaches you, trust her with the truth I was too afraid to tell you. Nathaniel read the sentence again. He had spent 20 years believing his mother had left him with 3 simple instructions. Keep the cabin, stay on the mountain, never marry. Now he understood that those instructions had never been the whole story. There had been another life involving his father, Thomas Reed, and a secret so carefully protected that 2 families had carried it across 20 years. Eleanor sat across from him in the abandoned cabin. "My father knew," she said quietly. Nathaniel nodded. "So did my mother." "Yes, and neither of them told us." Nathaniel folded the letter. "Maybe they thought they were protecting us." "From what?" He looked toward the dark window. "I don't know." Before dawn, they searched the abandoned cabin again. Near the fireplace, Nathaniel discovered a small iron box hidden beneath a loose stone. Inside were a pocket watch, 3 folded maps, a dried sprig of blue wildflowers, and an old photograph. Nathaniel lifted it. His father stood beside a younger Thomas Reed. Behind them was a small wooden sign whose writing had nearly faded away. Eleanor leaned closer. "I've seen that place." Nathaniel looked at her. "Where?" "My father had a photograph almost identical to this." "Where?" "In his study." "Do you still have it?" She shook her head. "My father's things were packed after he died." Isle placed the photograph inside his coat. But there was more to discover. Outside the cabin, the snow had stopped. They followed a nearly invisible path descending toward a frozen creek. At the bottom stood a small stone shelter built into the mountain. The door was hidden behind pine branches. Nathaniel pushed them aside. There were fresh footprints in the snow. "They're recent," Eleanor whispered. Nathaniel nodded. Someone had been there. Inside, the shelter was clean. A pot sat beside the stove. Fresh wood was stacked near the wall. A blanket had been folded across the bed. Someone had been living there recently. Nathaniel stared at the cold coffee on the table. "He left recently." "Your father?" Nathaniel didn't answer. Then Eleanor found a small metal key beneath the bed. Nathaniel recognized it immediately. "My mother's key." He stared at it. "How do you know?" "She wore it around her neck." Nearby they discovered a narrow wooden door hidden in the wall. Nathaniel inserted the key. The lock clicked. Inside was a hidden compartment containing boxes of letters, dozens of them. Some were addressed to Nathaniel's mother, some to Thomas Reed. Others had no names. Nathaniel opened one written by his father. It explained that Nathaniel Mercer had not disappeared simply because he was being hunted by a land company. He had discovered that several families in the northern mountains were being forced from their land because powerful men wanted control of a valuable mineral deposit beneath the valley. Matthew had gathered evidence. Thomas Reed had helped him, but someone betrayed them. Matthew realized that returning home would put his wife and young Nathaniel in danger, so he disappeared. For years he lived under different names in remote mountain camps, while secretly exchanging letters with his wife through Thomas. Nathaniel sat down. For 20 years he had thought his father abandoned him. Now he realized that his father had sacrificed his place in the family because he believed staying would put them in danger. Eleanor sat beside him. "You were loved." Nathaniel looked at her. "You spent 20 years thinking you weren't worth staying for," she continued. "But he left because he believed staying would put you in danger." Nathaniel looked down at the letter. I still lost him. Yes. But losing someone doesn't mean they didn't love you. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. That afternoon they discovered another clue. One letter contained a rough drawing of a narrow valley. Nathaniel recognized it. The old Cedar Basin. How far? 2 days. They packed their supplies and continued north. The trail became narrower. At several points they had to lead the horses through deep snow. By the second evening, the mountains became strangely quiet. Nathaniel stopped. Eleanor looked at him. What? Listen. She heard nothing. Exactly. No birds, no wind, no movement. Nathaniel lowered his voice. We're being watched. They continued carefully. Near sunset, they discovered an old mining trail leading toward a steep cliff. At its end stood a wooden stable hidden among the trees. Someone had horses. Nathaniel approached cautiously. One horse moved inside. Eleanor recognized it. My father's. Nathaniel looked at her. Are you sure? She nodded. I saw it often when I was young. They searched the stable. A saddle hung from the wall. Inside it was a folded note. Eleanor opened it. Her face changed. What? She handed it to Nathaniel. It contained only one sentence. Here. They looked at each other. Someone had anticipated their arrival. Then a voice came from the darkness. You shouldn't have come. Nathaniel turned. A man stepped from behind the trees. He was older, perhaps 55. His hair was white. His face was thin. And he carried no weapon. Eleanor stared at him. She had seen that face in her father's old photograph. Her breath stopped. Nathaniel? The man's eyes filled with tears. Nathaniel stepped forward. Who are you? The stranger answered quietly. My name is Matthew. Nathaniel stopped breathing. For 20 years he had imagined his father's grave. For 20 years he had wondered whether the man had died alone somewhere in the mountains. Now he stood only a few feet away. Older, changed, but alive. You're alive. Matthew nodded. Yes. Why? Matthew's expression broke. Because your mother asked me to stay alive, long enough to protect you. Nathaniel's eyes filled with tears. You let me believe you abandoned us. I know. For 20 years. I know. Nathaniel's voice hardened. Why didn't you come back? Matthew looked at Eleanor. Because the men who wanted me dead never stopped searching. Eleanor felt a chill. But the threat is gone. Matthew shook his head. No. He looked toward the mountain valley. Nathaniel stepped closer. Who? Matthew took a breath. The people who wanted that valley 20 years ago never gave up. He looked directly at Nathaniel. And now they know you're here. Silence fell. Nathaniel's first meeting with his father should have been a moment of joy. Instead, it came with another warning. The danger had followed them into the mountains. Matthew then revealed that Nathaniel's mother had never sent Eleanor merely to deliver a letter. She had chosen Eleanor because Thomas Reed was the only person she trusted to guide Nathaniel toward the truth. But one final piece was missing. Matthew told them that the evidence proving everything was hidden in the old mine beneath Cedar Basin. He had never retrieved it because going there alone would have exposed him. Now he believed the time had come. That night, Nathaniel sat beside Eleanor beneath the stars. His father slept nearby. For the first time, the loneliness of the cabin seemed very far away. Eleanor looked at him. You found him. Nathaniel nodded. I did. Are you happy? Nathaniel thought about it. Yes. Then he looked at her. But not only because of him. Eleanor smiled. He reached for her hand. There was no hesitation now, no fear. He held her hand as naturally as if he had been doing it for years. For 20 years, I thought my mother wanted me to live alone. He looked toward the sleeping figure of his father. Maybe she was trying to make sure I lived long enough to find the people I was supposed to have. Eleanor squeezed his hand. But neither of them knew that the deepest secret had not yet been revealed. Because Matthew had one final confession. He had not been the person Eleanor's father was protecting. The person Thomas Reed had spent 8 years protecting was Eleanor herself, and the letter her father had given her was never intended only for Nathaniel. It contained a second message, one that Eleanor had not yet discovered, and when she finally opened it, she would learn why her father had spent his final years keeping her far away from these mountains. The answer would bring the entire secret together, and it would force Nathaniel to choose between the solitary life he had known for 20 years and the woman his mother had somehow known he would one day need. The night beneath the stars felt strangely peaceful. Nathaniel Mercer had spent 20 years believing he was alone in the world. Now his father was alive. Eleanor was beside him, and the letter written by his mother had led them to answers Nathaniel had never imagined. But there was still one sentence from Matthew that troubled Eleanor. Thomas Reed wasn't protecting me. He was protecting you. She had assumed her father's secrecy was connected to Matthew. Now she understood that wasn't true. Her father had been protecting her. And there was something in that letter she had not yet discovered. The next morning, Matthew led them deeper into Cedar Basin. The trail narrowed between steep rock walls. Pine trees grew from cracks in the stone, their branches heavy with snow. Nathaniel rode ahead. Eleanor followed. Matthew remained behind them, constantly watching the slopes. After several hours, they reached an abandoned mine entrance. The wooden supports were old and partly collapsed. A black opening disappeared into the mountain. Matthew dismounted. "This is where I hid the evidence," he said. Nathaniel stared into the darkness. "You were here all these years?" "Sometimes," Matthew replied. "Why didn't you come home?" Matthew looked at him. "Because I was afraid someone would follow me." Eleanor stepped closer. "Who?" Matthew shook his head. "Not yet." Nathaniel frowned. "You spent 20 years keeping secrets." Matthew looked at Eleanor. "Some secrets kept you alive." They entered the mine. The passage was narrow. Water dripped from the ceiling. Their lanterns cast moving shadows against the rock. After several minutes, Matthew stopped beside a wooden support. He pulled away a loose board. Behind it was a small metal container. Nathaniel opened it. Inside were documents, land deeds, maps, payment records, names, letters, proof that wealthy investors had secretly planned to take control of the valley. But one document was different. It was a list of families. Beside each name was a date. Beside some names was a single word: gone. Eleanor stared at the pages. These families disappeared? Matthew nodded. Some were forced to leave. Others simply vanished. Nathaniel's expression hardened. "And my father was investigating this." "Yes." "Who ordered it?" Matthew didn't answer. Instead, he handed Nathaniel another document. At the bottom was a signature. Nathaniel recognized the name: Sheriff Elias Ward, the same man who had served as sheriff of the settlement when Nathaniel was a boy. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. He was involved. Matthew nodded. He was one of them. Eleanor felt uneasy. "But he's dead. So are many of the men who helped him." Nathaniel looked at the documents. "Then why is everyone still afraid?" Matthew's face became grim. "Because not everyone involved is dead." The three of them continued deeper into the mine. Near the back wall, they found an old wooden chest. Matthew stopped. "This is what I could never bring myself to open." Nathaniel looked at him. "Why?" "Because it belongs to your mother." Nathaniel stared at the chest. "My mother?" Matthew nodded. "She gave it to me before I disappeared." Nathaniel opened it. Inside were several personal items: his mother's sewing scissors, a blue ribbon, an old family Bible, and a packet wrapped in cloth. Nathaniel recognized the handwriting immediately. His mother's. He unfolded the first page. It wasn't a letter to him. It was addressed to Eleanor. Eleanor's breath caught. To Eleanor Reed. "I've never seen this." Nathaniel handed it to her. The letter began with a simple sentence: If you are reading this, then my son has finally found his way home." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She continued reading. Nathaniel's mother explained that she had known Eleanor's family for years. Thomas Reed had not merely helped Matthew disappear, he had helped protect Nathaniel from someone much closer than they realized. Someone in Pine Hollow had been watching Nathaniel since childhood. Someone who knew about the mine. Someone who wanted the evidence destroyed. And that person had been keeping track of every woman who came near Nathaniel. Eleanor stopped. "They were watching the women who came to you?" Matthew nodded. "Your mother was afraid," he said. "Why?" "Because she believed anyone who became close to Nathaniel could be used against him." Eleanor looked at Nathaniel. Suddenly, his 20 years of rejected courtship seemed very different. Perhaps some of those women had not simply been turned away. Perhaps his mother had feared what could happen if someone came too close. Nathaniel looked shaken. "I thought she wanted me alone." "She wanted you alive," Matthew said. Eleanor continued reading. Then she found the sentence that changed everything. "Nathaniel must never marry until he understands what happened to his father. If he does, the people hunting Matthew will use his wife as leverage." Eleanor lowered the page. That was why. Nathaniel stared at the ground. For 20 years, he had obeyed a promise he thought had been born from grief. Now he realized it had been born from fear. His mother's final wish had not been to keep him lonely. She had wanted him to survive. Eleanor continued reading, but the next part was written specifically for her. "Eleanor, your father will never tell you the truth unless I am gone." She looked up. Her hands were shaking. "My father knew." "Yes. What did he know?" "That you were connected to this from the beginning." Eleanor's face went pale. "How?" Matthew looked toward the mine entrance. "Your mother." Eleanor stopped. "My mother?" Matthew nodded. "She wasn't simply Thomas Reed's wife. She was the daughter of one of the families forced from the valley." Eleanor stared at him. Her mother had died when Eleanor was young. She remembered little. Only a gentle voice, a red scarf, and a song. Nothing more. Matthew explained that Eleanor's maternal family had lost everything when the mining scheme began. Her grandfather had refused to sell. The family was threatened. They fled. Thomas Reed helped them escape. Years later, Thomas married Eleanor's mother. That was how he became connected to Matthew and Nathaniel's family. Eleanor looked at the letter again. History was connected to the mountains. She had spent her childhood believing her father was simply a traveling merchant who feared remote country. He had actually been protecting the descendants of people who had been driven from their homes. But there was one final part. The letter explained why Eleanor had been chosen. Nathaniel's mother had seen Eleanor as a child. She had met Thomas and his family during one of their secret visits. She had watched Eleanor playing near the cabin, and she had believed that one day Eleanor would become the person Nathaniel could trust, not because of destiny, not because she could somehow heal him, but because Eleanor's family understood what it meant to protect someone you loved. The letter ended with a final request. "Do not ask my son to forget me. Ask him to live beyond me." Eleanor could barely read the last line. She handed the letter to Nathaniel. He read it in silence. Then he closed his eyes. A tear moved down his cheek. For 20 years, he had carried his mother's final promise like a chain. Now she had given him permission to put it down. Matthew approached his son. "I should have told you sooner." Nathaniel looked at him. "Yes, I was afraid. So was she." Matthew nodded. "I thought if I stayed away, you would have a chance at a normal life." Nathaniel looked around the mine. This was normal? Matthew gave a sad smile. "No." Nathaniel laughed quietly. It was the first real laugh Eleanor had heard from him. They emerged from the mine late that afternoon. But they were not alone. 3 riders stood near the horses. Their faces were unfamiliar. Matthew immediately recognized them. "They found us." Nathaniel moved Eleanor behind him. One rider called out, "Give us the documents." Nathaniel raised his rifle. "You're too late." The man smiled. You don't understand what those papers will do. They'll expose you. They'll destroy half the families in Pine Hollow. Nathaniel frowned. What? The writer looked toward Matthew. Your father never told you. Matthew's expression changed. The man continued. The men who controlled the mine were not the only ones who benefited. He pointed toward the valley. Several respected families in Pine Hollow received land and money after the original families were forced out. Eleanor realized what that meant. The secrets ran through the entire settlement. It wasn't simply one villain. It was a community built partly on stolen land. Nathaniel looked at Matthew. Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought the truth would destroy everyone. And hiding it? Matthew looked down. It destroyed us instead. Silence. Nathaniel looked at the documents, then at Eleanor. He knew what he had to do. They rode back toward Pine Hollow before nightfall. The documents were delivered to the territorial authorities through a trusted circuit rider. The investigation that followed lasted months. Land claims were reopened. Old records were examined. Several families were forced to return property. Others lost wealth gained through the original scheme. The mountain settlement changed forever. But Nathaniel's story changed too. When spring finally arrived, he returned to his cabin. Eleanor came with him. Matthew stayed in the valley below. For the first time, the cabin did not feel like a grave. The second chair remained beside the fire. 2 cups remained on the table. 2 coats hung near the door. And Nathaniel no longer seemed troubled by any of it. One evening, Eleanor found him sitting on the porch. She sat beside him. Do you still remember the promise? Nathaniel looked toward the mountains. Yes. And I kept it. Eleanor smiled. For 20 years. Nathaniel nodded. Now I think I've earned the right to break it. Him? He smiled. I don't want to spend another 20 years alone. Eleanor rested her head against his shoulder. You won't. He took her hand. There was no dramatic proposal, no crowd, no ceremony. Just 2 people sitting beneath the mountains, knowing that the life ahead of them finally belonged to them. Months later, Nathaniel returned to Pine Hollow. The women who had once whispered about him now saw him walking through town beside Eleanor. Someone joked that the mountain man had finally been conquered. Nathaniel laughed. No. He looked at Eleanor. I was finally understood. The stories spread through the settlement. People remembered how Nathaniel had refused every woman for 20 years. They remembered the strange woman who had ridden into the mountains and knocked only once. But they didn't know the whole truth. The knock had not simply brought a woman to his door. It had brought back a letter from his mother, a forgotten father, a buried family history, and permission to stop living as though love was something he had to fear. Years later, Nathaniel would sometimes take his grandchildren to the old cabin. He would show them the blue ribbon that had started everything. And when they asked why he kept it, he would smile. He would tell them that once, a long time ago, their grandmother rode through the mountains carrying a letter. She knocked on his door, only once. And when he opened it, he discovered that the woman he had spent 20 years waiting for had already been known to his mother. Not because his mother had chosen his future for him, but because she had finally understood something Nathaniel was too young to understand. A man's life cannot be measured by how long he survives alone. It is measured by what he finally allows himself to love. Nathaniel spent 20 years believing his mother's final wish was a command to remain alone. Eleanor helped him discover it had actually been a promise of something else. A promise that one day, when the danger was gone and the truth could finally be spoken, he would be free. Free to leave the cabin. Free to forgive his father. Free to remember his mother without obeying her fear. And most importantly, free to love the woman who had crossed the mountains carrying the one thing he had never known he needed: her letter.